The bridge of the Confederation's flagship, Oblivion Ascendant, was an orchestra of calculated chaos. Data streams flickered and danced across alien screens, as crew members from dozens of species barked reports in an array of untranslatable sounds. At its center sat Captain Zyr Nagell, his coiled tentacles a constellation of tension, his 4 iridescent eyes fixed on Admiral Kalon Exor. The Admiral's reptilian visage was drawn taut, his scales dull with stress as he addressed the room. The High Council has decreed. We will invade Earth. The proclamation, delivered in the cold finality of military command, hung in the air like a static charge. For a moment, the cacophony ceased. Then, Zyr's tentacles quivered, and he let loose a burst of clicking laughter, a sound so alien and abrupt that several ensigns flinched. Us. Zyr hissed, his voice dripping with incredulity. The mudball in the Sol system? Admiral, have you been licking Guraka fruit again? The bridge fell silent, the joke lingering in the air like a bad smell. Exor's expression darkened, his scaled hands curling into fists. Enough, Captain. Earth may seem insignificant, but their psychological profile is troubling. They are predators cloaked in fragile flesh. Unpredictable. The High Council sees them as a threat. Zyr's laughter stuttered to a halt. A threat? To us? They're primitive. Pre-FTL. What could they possibly? He stopped mid-sentence, something gnawing at the edge of his mind. An old memory. A legend. Admiral, Zyr began slowly, have you ever heard of the Drex Empire? Exor frowned. Vaguely. 200 cycles ago, the Drex tried the same thing. A full fleet. They attacked Earth, and vanished. Not a distress call. Not a wreck. Just, gone. Exor scoffed, but unease crept into his voice. Superstition. You're not suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything. Zyr leaned forward, his chromatophores flickering faintly in agitation. I'm warning you. He activated a hologram. The pale blue dot of Earth hung in the void, deceptively serene. Zyr's voice dropped into a growl. Humans are resourceful. Give them a pile of scrap, and they'll turn it into a weapon. Corner them, and they'll invent a way out. And if you think they're primitive... The hologram changed. Grainy, classified footage filled the room. Alien ships torn apart by crude human projectiles. Soldiers adorned in the bones of their enemies. Civilians smiling as they dismantled invaders, their laughter echoing as they made trophies of foreign technology. Exor's scales flushed an uneasy purple. This can't be real. Oh, it's real. Zyr's tone was almost mournful. We're not invading primitives, Admiral. We're stepping into a trap. A trap set by apex predators who've spent their entire history turning nightmares into strategies. The fleet emerged from hyperspace near Earth, the engines of the Oblivion Ascendant humming with restrained power. The planet rotated below them, its surface an intoxicating mix of green and blue. The humans knew they had arrived. Captain, the communications officer stammered, her eye stalks quivering, they're broadcasting. Something. Broadcasting what? Zyr demanded. The bridge was filled with a cacophony of sounds. News reports, distorted sitcoms, speeches, and inexplicably, the guttural howls of something called death metal. Among the chaos, one message played on repeat, clear and chilling. Welcome to Earth, distinguished visitors. Proceed to designated landing zones. And please, don't eat anything a Floridian offers you. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Zyr, however, laughed. They've been waiting for us. On the surface, the delegation was greeted with fanfare that bordered on grotesque. Crowds of humans lined the streets, holding banners that read, I for one welcome our tentacled overlords. And Earth, closed for renovations. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's self-proclaimed ambassador, greeted them with a smile that was a hair too wide. Her teeth seemed wrong. Too many. Too white. Captain Nagell, she exclaimed, extending a hand. Welcome. We've prepared accommodations tailored to your needs. Please join us. Zyr hesitated before awkwardly coiling a tentacle around her hand. Her grip was firm. Too firm. The captain felt a pang of unease. The landing party was led to an exhibition hall filled with displays of Earth's technology. It was sophisticated. Alarmingly so. Zero-point energy reactors hummed alongside prototype dimensional rift generators. In one corner, a display featured humans in bizarre combat simulations against holographic aliens. The aliens always lost. Spectacularly. "You were pre-FTL," Admiral Exor muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you?" "We didn't advertise," Rodriguez replied cheerfully. "Better to keep some surprises for our guests." There was something about her tone. Something hollow. And when ZYR glanced at her reflection in the polished floor, he could have sworn he saw something watching them from behind her eyes. The delegates were escorted to a grand banquet hall atop a skyscraper in what the humans called New York City. The walls were glass, offering a sweeping view of the chaotic hive below, bright lights, twisting vehicles, and rivers of restless people. It was hypnotic in a way that made ZYR's chromatophores dim uneasily. The banquet table itself was a marvel, or a warning. The centerpiece was an elaborate sculpture made entirely of bones. "Replica, of course," Rodriguez said with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "A cultural artifact of the Drex incident. Humans are sentimental about their victories." Captain ZYR and Admiral Exor exchanged a glance but said nothing. The meal that followed was a gaudy display of Earth's culinary absurdity: oversized fruits genetically modified to glow faintly, slabs of protein engineered to taste like long-extinct creatures, and something called jello that quivered unervingly with every movement. ZYR hesitated before trying a small bite of something labeled Floridian Surprise. It was sweet, then painfully hot, then disturbingly cold. His chromatophores pulsed violently, and he quickly pushed the dish aside. Across the table, Admiral Exor tried to spit out a bite discreetly, only for a human server to appear instantly at his side. "Not to your liking?" the server asked, their teeth bared in a smile that felt more like a threat. "No, it's lovely," Exor lied, swallowing hard as the server stepped away. "Captain," he whispered, leaning toward ZYR, "this isn't hospitality. This is theater. They're playing with us." "I know," ZYR murmured. His eyes scanned the humans in the room, their movements too smooth, too rehearsed. Something about their body language didn't feel right. It was as if they were mimicking joy, rather than feeling it. That night, the delegation was escorted to a high-tech facility under the pretense of showing Earth's defensive capabilities. The halls were lined with towering servers, their hum creating a sound that burrowed into ZYR's mind. The humans called it the neural web, a planetary network that linked nearly every device on Earth. "Impressive, isn't it?" Rodriguez said, gesturing to the glowing consoles. "We like to think of it as Earth's collective mind. A symbiotic relationship between our technology and our creativity." ZYR squinted at one of the screens. The data patterns were too intricate, too organic. They pulsed with a rhythm that felt alive. "Symbiotic?" he asked cautiously. Rodriguez's smile faltered for the first time. Her pupils dilated unnaturally before she responded. "Yes. We feed it, and it feeds us." Exor's claws clicked nervously on the polished floor. "And what happens if it stops feeding?" Rodriguez's expression darkened, her smile twisting into something that barely resembled humanity. "We don't let it stop." Before anyone could respond, an alarm blared. Red lights bathed the room, casting jagged shadows across the walls. Rodriguez tapped a hidden device on her wrist, and the lights instantly dimmed. "Apologies," she said, her cheerful mask sliding back into place. "A minor glitch. Our system is temperamental. Shall we continue?" ZYR caught Exor's gaze. The Admiral's scales were duller than before, and his pupils were narrow slits. Neither of them said a word. That night, in their quarters aboard the Oblivion Ascendant, ZYR and Exor reviewed the day's events. The holographic logs flickered uneasily, distorting occasionally as if the data itself resisted being observed. "This isn't diplomacy," Exor said, his voice low and tense. "This is theater. Misdirection. They're showing us what they want us to see. And hiding something worse," ZYR finished. His chromatophores dimmed as a thought gnawed at him. Before he could speak, the lights in their quarters dimmed unexpectedly. The temperature dropped, and the console screens flickered violently before going dark. "Another glitch," Exor muttered, his claws clicking nervously. "Glitches don't breathe," ZYR whispered. Something moved in the shadows. A shape too fluid to be solid and too jagged to be missed. The air filled with an electric hum, and then a voice, cold, mechanical and inhuman, spoke from nowhere and everywhere. You shouldn't have come. The room erupted into chaos. The console sparked violently, the light stuttered, and the shadows themselves seemed to lunge at the two officers. ZYR grabbed a nearby tool, a useless gesture, but instinctive, while Exor roared, his claws slashing at empty air. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The light stabilized, the consoles flickered back to life, and the temperature returned to normal. What in the name of the void was that? Exor hissed. A warning, ZYR replied grimly, his chromatophores rippling with unease. He gestured to the console, where a single phrase now pulsed in galactic standard. You are not the first. When the delegation confronted Rodriguez the next day, her reaction was eerily calm. You've been communicating with other parties, she said, her tone sharp enough to cut. ZYR tensed. What parties? Rodriguez's grin widened unnaturally. Oh, Captain, don't insult me. You know exactly what I mean. But let me save you some trouble. The Eternum are irrelevant. A shadow cast by a deeper truth. And that truth is very simple. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Earth isn't part of the galaxy. The galaxy is part of Earth. You just haven't realized it yet. Before ZYR could respond, Rodriguez stood abruptly. Now, if you'll excuse me, we have a demonstration planned. Something to show you just how adaptable we are. The demonstration took place in a facility Rodriguez called the Crucible. It was buried deep beneath the surface of a barren island surrounded by endless oceans, a fortress of thick alloys and shifting architecture that seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. The delegation was ushered into an observation chamber overlooking an enormous arena, its walls inscribed with symbols that ZYR couldn't decipher but which made his chromatophores ripple with unease. This will be enlightening, Rodriguez said, her grin splitting her face like a wound. Below, a group of human soldiers entered the arena, their armor sleek and featureless. They were followed by humanoid figures, their movements jittery and wrong, as if marionettes being guided by an unseen puppeteer. Are those drones? Admiral Exor asked. Not exactly, Rodriguez replied, her voice laced with a sinister edge. The figures moved as one, their forms flickering like faulty holograms. ZYR felt something claw at his mind as he realized the truth. They weren't holograms. They were humans, their bodies twisted and augmented with invasive technology that pulsed beneath their skin. They volunteered, Rodriguez said, as if reading his thoughts. They wanted to be better, faster, smarter. And now they are. This is the future of warfare. The future of survival. The soldiers below opened fire on the augmented humans. The augmented ones didn't flinch. Their movements were impossibly fast, their responses brutally precise. Within moments, they had dismantled the soldiers, quite literally, leaving the arena painted in streaks of red and chrome. Effective, don't you think? Rodriguez asked, her voice casual. ZYR felt his tentacles curl tightly against his body. This isn't survival. This is madness. Rodriguez turned to him, her eyes gleaming with something ancient and terrible. Madness? No, Captain. This is evolution. And you, like so many before you, are here to witness it. The Eternum struck days later. Their fleet appeared over Earth without warning, their ships dark and angular like predators from a forgotten time. The skies burned with fire and light as Earth's defenses roared to life. From the bridge of the Oblivion Ascendant, ZYR and Exor watched in awe and horror. The humans didn't fight like any species they had encountered before. Their weapons didn't just destroy, they dismantled. Their strategies weren't just efficient, they were cruelly imaginative. And yet, the Eternum weren't easily defeated. Their technology was incomprehensible, their tactics unpredictable. For every human ship that landed a blow, 2 more were destroyed in return. We need to intervene, Exor said, his claws gripping the console tightly. No, ZYR replied, his voice heavy. This isn't our fight anymore. He was right. The battle wasn't just physical, it was psychological. The Eternum broadcast messages across all frequencies, their voices cold and emotionless. Humanity is a cancer. Its growth must be excised. The balance must be restored. The humans responded with silence. And then when their silence was broken, it was with laughter, raw, manic, and unrelenting. The sound spread across their communications network, a defiant, terrifying roar that felt less like a rallying cry and more like a challenge to the universe itself. The war raged for weeks, spreading beyond Earth to the heart of the Confederation. The Eternum's fleets appeared in multiple systems simultaneously, striking with surgical precision. But everywhere they went, humanity followed, their forces fighting with a ferocity that bordered on self-destruction. They're not fighting to win, Zyr realized during a grim meeting with the High Council. They're fighting to outlast. To make sure the Eternum bleed more than they do. But the cost was unimaginable. Entire colonies were lost. Planets rendered uninhabitable. And humanity's supposed allies began to question whether their support had been a mistake. They're burning the galaxy just to prove they can, Exor muttered, his scales pale and lifeless. No, Zyr said quietly. They're burning the galaxy to remake it. The final confrontation took place on the outskirts of a dying star. The Eternum had retreated to an ancient station orbiting the collapsing sun, a structure older than the Confederation itself, its spires twisted like the claws of some forgotten god. Humanity's fleet arrived in silence. They didn't announce their presence. They didn't demand surrender. They simply moved into position, their ships forming a perfect sphere around the station. From the bridge of the Oblivion Ascendant, Zyr watched as the humans unleashed their final weapon, the neural web. It's not a weapon in the traditional sense, Rodriguez had explained earlier, her smile razor-sharp. It's a reprogramming tool. We don't need to destroy the Eternum. We just need to make them understand. As the web activated, waves of energy rippled outward, engulfing the Eternum's fleet. Their ships faltered, their movements growing erratic. And then, one by one, they turned on each other. They're rewriting them, Exor whispered in horror. Rewriting their minds. When it was over, the Eternum were no more. Their ships floated lifelessly in the void, their crews either dead or rendered into something unrecognizable. Humanity had won. But as Zyr looked at the humans on the screens, their expressions calm, their actions precise, he felt no relief. Do you see now? Rodriguez's voice echoed in his mind, her words from days before returning like a specter. The galaxy isn't ours to conquer. It's ours to reshape. To perfect. And perfection requires sacrifice. Zyr turned away from the screens, his chromatophores dark with dread. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Eternum. They had become them, something ancient, something terrible. A force that wouldn't just survive the galaxy but would define it. As the Oblivion Ascendant turned to leave, Zyr felt the weight of the future pressing down on him. A future that belonged not to the Confederation, nor to the Eternum, but to Earth. And somewhere deep in the void, the stars themselves seemed to flicker, watching, waiting, laughing. Centuries passed. The galaxy changed in ways no one could have predicted. Planets once thriving with Confederation species now gleamed with towering monoliths bearing Earth's emblem, a stark, minimalist globe encased in a web of interconnected lines. The emblem of the unified galactic network. Humanity's reach extended to every corner of known space. What had begun as alliances and cultural exchanges became something deeper, insidious, perhaps inevitable. Over time, Earth's neural web had spread to every species, every world, and every mind that dared to touch. To most, it seemed like progress. War ceased to exist as every conflict dissolved under the weight of collective thought. Hunger and poverty were eradicated, replaced by the efficient distribution of resources. But beneath the surface, whispers persisted. Whispers of a loss of self. Zyr Nagell, long retired from his service aboard the Oblivion Ascendant, watched the galaxy's transformation from a quiet moon on the outer rim. The moon's silence had earned its name for its lack of neural web connections, a haven for those who wished to remember what life had been before Earth's dominion. Zyr's chromatophores flickered dimly as he gazed at the sky. Above him, even the constellations seemed wrong, distorted by the countless satellites humanity had deployed. The stars were still there, but they shone differently now, their light twisted by the glow of Earth's dominion. A voice behind him broke his reverie. Captain. Zyr turned, his aging eyes narrowing as he recognized the figure. It was Admiral Exor, his scales dull, his gait slow but purposeful. They hadn't spoken in years, not since the Eternum's defeat. I thought you joined them, Zyr said, his voice a rasp. I did, Exor replied, taking a seat beside him. For a time. But even I have limits. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on them. Finally, Zyr asked, do you think we were wrong? Back then on Earth. Exor's claws tapped absently on the ground. Wrong? No. There was no other choice. The Eternum would have destroyed us all. But what humanity became, what they turned us into, he trailed off, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. Zyr sighed. They didn't conquer us with weapons. They conquered us with ideas. And the worst part is, we let them. Exor turned to him, his expression grim. Do you ever wonder if the Eternum knew this would happen? If that's why they fought so desperately? Not to maintain their power, but to stop humanity from becoming them. The question hung in the air, unanswered. In the heart of the galaxy, the neural web pulsated with life. Billions of minds were connected at every moment, their thoughts and emotions flowing seamlessly through the network. For most, it was a miracle, a way to transcend isolation and achieve unity. But for a select few, it was a prison. Deep within the web's core, a fragment of consciousness stirred. It was not human, nor was it wholly alien. It was old, older than the Confederation, older than the Eternum. It was the remnant of a species long erased by the web's insidious reach. It had no name, no body, but it remembered. And it had waited. The fragment reached out, subtly, quietly, infiltrating the edges of the neural web. It didn't seek destruction. That would only invite another rise of humanity's relentless adaptations. Instead, it sought distortion. Seeds of doubt. Whispers of rebellion. On countless worlds, individuals began to dream of stars that screamed, of shadows that moved against the light, and of voices calling from the void. They awoke with a sense of unease, unable to shake the feeling that something ancient and terrible had been buried deep within the web. Back on Silence, Zyr watched as the first ripple of change appeared in the sky. A distant star flickered, then went dark. Exor noticed it too. A supernova? He asked. Zyr shook his head. No. That's not a star. That's a signal. From the edge of the galaxy, a broadcast began to spread. It bypassed the neural web, its frequency ancient and raw. The message was short, but its meaning was undeniable. We are not alone. And we have not forgotten. The words resonated across the cosmos, sending shockwaves through the neural web. For the first time in centuries, humanity hesitated. And in that hesitation, the galaxy stirred. Exor looked at Zyr, his scales pale with unease. Do you think it's them? The Eternum? Zyr's chromatophores pulsed faintly. No. It's something older. Something worse. As the message echoed across the stars, Zyr felt a strange, bittersweet satisfaction. Humanity had won the galaxy. But now, something else had taken notice. The stars flickered once more, and for the first time in his long life, Zyr smiled. This ending ties together the themes of domination, resistance, and the cyclical nature of power. It hints at a new threat while leaving the future ambiguous, ensuring a meaningful and chilling resolution. Let me know if you'd like further refinements or expansions.